We welcome in Dr. Tim McKnight for our talk with the doc. I got a little carried away with bug bites earlier.
You're excited to talk about bugs, aren't you?
You are going to talk about that at some point, right?
Yes, and I can tell you why I changed that at the last minute. That wasn't you. When we have these discussions, sometimes they're topics or things that I've addressed just yesterday in the office, and they're relevant to me and what's happening. Sometimes they're timely with the time of the year and things, but this particular topic was one that I know, bug bites we're going to need to talk about because it's going to happen. People are going to be in sheds, they're going to step on something, or they get a spider bite or a mosquito bite. And what I want to be prepared to talk about is the alternative treatments, because there's the standard treatments, and some people are a little bit concerned about some of the topicals that people are putting on their skin if they're healthy or safe. And I want to have time to research that a little bit before I broadcast that. So, but we didn't really finish the topic last week on sports physicals. We talked about a lot of the common injuries that the athletes have.
Yeah, and why they would need rest.
Right, exactly. And I think that's crucial. But I want to talk about the preparation, and really, I think this is more for parents. They need to be prepared when they send their kids in. Sometimes the parents will come. I've probably done over 1,000 physicals, maybe 2,000 physicals over the years, and worked for many years as a team physician at Claymont. So I've seen this a lot. And a lot of times we'll have these clinics where on a Saturday morning we'll just have 100, 200 kids show up, and we're just lining them up and getting them through quick, and it's real nice for the families and the athletes. And probably the first thing that parents need to know about these exams is they need to make sure they fill out the history forms for their child. So that's medical history. Did they have a broken bone when they were younger? Did they have asthma? And just be very thorough with those, because that slows down the whole process. That should be completed in depth and in detail. And what you're supposed to do on these forms from the Ohio High School Athletic Association is say, okay, when I was 5, I had my appendix out, and this was the date. It was my left pinky that I broke on this date. So it needs to be a little bit of detail. And often, if that's not completed, it might sound trite or silly, but it's hard for us to do a complete exam unless we understand that. Sometimes we'll say, okay, why don't you step out of the room and have that completed, or your parent help your, mom and dad help you finish that. Because that history is the most important thing. These kids are almost all very healthy, but knowing a good, accurate history alerts us to things we might have to be a little bit more detailed on as we do the examination. So that's, to me, the most important thing. We get height and weight, and we get blood pressure, heart rate, and we do a vision test. That's all part of the pre-screening before I actually see them. The nurse usually does that. And then we do the physical examination. Now, as I said, these kids are pretty healthy, but there's a couple of common conditions, or not common, but serious conditions we have to really pay attention to on the exam. One is if they've had a history of concussions. We want to know that history well, and we want to do a good examination to make sure they're cleared. And now, as far as concussions go, a trainer is a big help with this. I've spent many years on the sidelines with Jamie Harlan, who is an excellent trainer, and he could pick up. Some kid goes down, and he could see that the kid's, as he gets up, he's stumbling to the other huddle on the other side, and boom, hey, I think we have a problem here. And a lot of times the kids will downplay that because they know if they look funny, they're out, and they don't want to come out. Some of the kids just do not want to come out. But you see a lot of concussions in volleyball too, which is kind of astounding.
A hard floor.
It is a hard floor, and so just having the trainer aware of that and knowing that there's a history of concussions. There's a whole protocol, and I know you know all about that. But we really don't want these kids to return to play until their symptoms are gone. And the more concussions you have, the more likely you are to suffer another one. And then
not to go too deep, but you have different protocols for returning to learn and returning to play, right?
Yeah, exactly. We used to be just, is your headache gone, and can you do a sprint without getting dizzy or nauseous? But now it's really the cognitive things that we're really telling them. You should not be in school if you're tired, if you can't focus. We don't want your brain overexerting itself cognitively, because that delays the recovery.
And you were starting to say repeat. and that it's easier to get the next one.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the danger behind concussions is the one danger is second impact syndrome, and these happen a few times every year where an athlete will have a concussion and they'll return to play before the brain is recovered. They can fake their recovery a little bit, and they get that second hit, and that just sends the brain into a almost an explosive bleeding episode where they can bleed to death pretty quickly in their brain. So that's tragic, and that should never happen. And athletes need to be honest. Parents and trainers need to be really alert and on their toes with this. I haven't seen it happen here, but I've worried about it a few times because I know the mindset of some of the athletes, they're going to play no matter what. So that's one issue. The other one is just the repeated traumatic brain injuries and what happens with like NFL athletes. They really have the encephalopathic changes that can be damaging long term. And that's not going to be the high school athlete, but we don't want them to even go down that pathway of potential serious neurological consequences.
I have seen that in person. I have a friend, Jay Brophy, who played in the NFL, and he's got it. And
yeah,
it's tragic.
It's terrible, and it's not just football. It's
Right.
a lot of sports. It's boxing and MMA, and any athlete that just has repeated injuries that way can be at risk for it. So concussions are one. Heart health is another one. We have to make sure there's no murmurs. There is a condition called IHSS where the lining of one of the walls of the heart is really thick, and it can impair the outflow tract of blood and can cause them to pass out and can cause other serious cardiac problems, issues. So we have to really listen to the heart. Then we have to listen to the lungs. There's more common than the heart issues are the asthmatic children, youth, and we have to make sure that they've got inhalers and they're doing all the appropriate things because sometimes they really suffer. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes you'll see kids at a swim meet, and after a swimming race, they'll be on the deck of the pool and they're bending over coughing. Well, that can be their asthma, a cough variant asthma. And a lot of times the chlorine in the pool will really send them into an asthmatic trigger. And so those are often missed. So those are the kind of things we want from that. So it's brain, it's heart, and it's lungs. And then it's things like skin conditions. Are you having recurrent MRSA infections on your skin like a wrestler, or potentially the fungal infections that the ringworm they all get? And those are tricky when you're trying to clear a wrestler to go to a meet where it's their last meet of their senior and they're going to sectionals and now they got a rash. They got to put somebody else at risk. So it's just having that history and talking, hey, when this happens, you start to get this rash, let us know. We'll get you on something so this doesn't impair your ability to be cleared for a wrestling event.
So fall sports are next, and so everybody thinks about this over the summer. Now's the time to start thinking about that history so you don't get hit with it on the last minute.
Right, and really it's whoever is giving these forms out, probably the coaches and the athletic trainers, the athletic director, they need to make sure that their parents are aware they have to help them. Sometimes the junior senior can do a pretty good job, but most of them are just like, hey, I'm going to get this exam and here it is.
Right.
And the parents really need to be part of that. And sometimes we've seen kids with high blood pressure and we're like, we can't quite clear this yet until we know if this is a problem, we get it under control. So every now and then we won't clear somebody. And often we'll see, and I think I mentioned this last week, often we'll see kids with flat feet that are going to end up with shin splints or foot problems if they don't wear arch supports, tight hamstrings. You're going to tear a hamstring or it's going to impair your ability to really run fast. Or sometimes we'll see a scoliosis where a spine isn't corrected. And it's important we catch that because if these go on too long, now you're looking at some kind of back issue long term or maybe some surgical intervention. If we catch this in a 13, 14-year-old early on, we can give them stretching exercises. We can get them to a chiropractor or someone that can help them. So it's not like these are just, sometimes a 15 or 16-year-old going like, oh, that was nothing. They listened to my heart and lungs and looked at my mouth. Well, sometimes it's much more detailed and it needs to be. And we're really trying to pick up things. And it's an opportunity for us to connect to these kids and say, hey, there's other things here that we have to find tactful ways to say, stay away from alcohol, don't drink, those kind of messages that you can give, safe sex practices. It's a chance for us to connect to kind of guide and teach these youth and young people ways to stay healthy off the field and off the court, as well as in the classroom and just in life in general. So those exams are really important, and I'm glad that they're mandatory. They last, as you know, they last for a year. So as you're finishing the school year, they could start probably in June, and that's going to last for an entire year. And so what we typically see is a lot of them will come in the middle of the summer, and we'll have a day where we do these mass exams, and that usually works pretty well. But some will wait till the last minute. They're just going to play high school basketball, and they'll wait till a week before, and we got to get this in quick. And so we don't want them to feel rushed, and we don't want to feel rushed with the process.
Right. And I'm glad you're giving them the message to just generally take care of their bodies, because someday they'll be our age, and they don't want arthritis and all those other things.
Well, that's the other thing I forgot to mention is when somebody's had a broken bone and they're coming back for this exam, I want to make sure that everything is healed, that their range of motion is normal again, because it can affect their athletic performance. And it's not the broken bones that we see a lot. It's the musculoskeletal. It's the tight tendons and muscles, an injury that hasn't fully rehabilitated. That's my chance to say, hey, this is how you fix this. These are the things you do now, so that when you're ready to start competing again, everything's healed and you're going to be in good shape and not have that recurrent injury. But it's like a concussion. Once you've had that injury one time, if you haven't fully rehabilitated that, it's going to come back and it'll haunt you. And, as a high school athlete, those were things that just really kind of got me down. Like, gosh, I can't get rid of these shin splints. They're terrible. Or I had a bursitis in my shoulder one year, and it was very painful. Didn't know what it was. And now I understand those things and how to prevent them and how to rehab them. So as I said last week, this is the time of the year for these high school athletes ending their seasons to rehabilitate these little nagging injuries, because as you mentioned, they're young kids are going to heal fast, and the rest of us don't heal as quick. And so this is a great opportunity for them to learn their bodies and to listen. Hey, I'm doing that 7th rep on the bench press. My shoulder's starting to tweak. No, I'm going to do 3 more because my buddy's standing here. Well, no, you don't. You listen to what your body's saying. That's a hard lesson to learn, but these are the kind of lessons they're learning now. And when they hear healthcare providers say, listen to your body, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But hopefully it helps them.
Yeah, hear it and then adhere to it.
Right,
That would
right,
be
yeah.
good too. Thank you, Dr.
You're
McKnight.
welcome.
And if you get a bug bite, we'll talk about that some other time.
I'll be ready.
We thank Dr. McKnight for being on this morning. Of course,